Hello and welcome to the Voices Listed podcast show with Dr. PMak, a show where I bring ordinary people who are doing extraordinary work in their communities. And today I'm excited to be speaking with Tiara Cash. Tiara Cash is a scholar practitioner who is focused on critical contemplative practices and has a vision to develop inclusive communities through pro social action, resilience through life transitions, and equitable mindfulness. Tiara is a PhD candidate with the Simon Fraser University in British Columbia in Canada, and is an owner and founder of Crowned Vitta LLC, which is an independent consulting firm that focuses on wellness as well as serving communities through the concepts of mindfulness, meta awareness, and meaningful self relationships and relationships with others through a lens of equity and inclusion. Tyra has been doing fantastic work, and I'm excited to be having her on this conversation on the podcast Voices Listed with Dr. PMak. Tiara, one of the things I was reflecting on, my friend, was just the work that you do, right? From your scholarship, and in particular, I think I was chatting with you before we started that, one of the things that I really want to get your insights into is the issues of mental health and the correlation between kindness and well-being. So yeah, let's start there. How did you get into this space? How did you get into the kindness and well-being and mental health space?
That's a great question. Honestly, I'd like to say that I was lovingly indoctrinated into it from my family.
Uh-huh.
That
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
it definitely comes from the background that I have with my folks who always worked in service jobs,
Okay.
who instilled in me that kindness and compassion,
Hmm.
love are all things that are important in the way that I move in the world. And so I kind of always had that in the back of my brain. But really this entire journey actually began when I suffered a career-ending injury as a student athlete in
Okay.
college.
Yeah.
And realized that I really, at that time, wanted to focus on student athletes and their retirement. And the fact
Mm-hmm.
that when I went through retirement from collegiate sport, I went
Yeah.
through a whole host of mental health issues and just well-being issues in general. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to just kind of get down to the reason why,
Yeah.
which started me on this kind of path to understanding that mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, all of those things are kind of
Mm-hmm.
really center to the identities that we have in the
Okay.
world and
Yeah.
how we navigate. And did my first master's, mostly on the body aspect, so
Mm-hmm.
kinesiology and focusing on the body.
Mm-hmm.
Worked in the field for a while and finished up my work tenure before going back to get my PhD at
Yeah.
Arizona State University. And it was
Mm-hmm.
there that I really started to dive into the aspects of kindness, prosociality,
Yeah.
compassion, and
Yeah.
well-being.
Yeah.
Because at the Center for Mindfulness, what we really focused on was utilizing this framework of mindfulness to help
Mm-hmm.
people to become more resilient, to
Yeah.
be more compassionate in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked there for about 5 years. There, I also developed a novel framework that I use in my work now called equitable
Equitable
mindfulness, which I'm
framework. Yeah.
sure we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about later.
Yes. Yep.
And then came back to get my PhD in social psychology so that I could really focus more on the mental, emotional aspects. And it's
Yeah.
here that I'm doing a lot of work on life transitions and
Sure.
using kindness, to
Yeah.
support others.
And so I mean you're such a well published scholar. I tried to get my head fixed around a few of the published articles, scholarly articles that you've put out there, and one of them that I was reading, in fact, I found it interesting that there's been research done that says that the effects of everyday stress, in one study that was done back in 2016, the effects of everyday stress were reduced when participants engaged in higher levels of kindness or generosity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so why is that? Why is kindness and generosity important in today's world? Like,
Well, I'll first say that there's many different theoretical reasons
hmm
why this shows up.
yeah,
And specifically with the work that I do in the Helping and Happiness Lab at Simon Fraser, we
yeah,
focus more on figuring out um, how kindness really helps us to build relationships,
okay,
thinking about the motivations behind, why we're kind to others and what that gives back to ourselves.
hmm
But a piece of it, I think, why is it like, why is this important for
yeah,
people? Well, I think look at the world right now, to be honest. Like, the world is
yeah,
a great reflection of
yeah,
why kindness and generosity is so important.
mm,
And the thing is it's a cyclical and
yeah,
reciprocal way of
hmm
really getting well-being benefits, because the more
hmm
kind we are, the more gracious we are to other people, the more we give back to our communities, the more we also have higher well-being. And I'm sure
okay,
you saw on one of the studies that I completed,
yeah,
which I'm expanding upon now in my dissertation, we
hmm
saw higher well-being on 7 well-being constructs for those who had
wow,
engaged in pro-social activity during a
sure,
transition. And so we're
yeah,
going through a transition right now,
yeah,
from, political transitions
sure, yeah,
to world transitions as it
yeah,
relates
yeah.
to folks who are being displaced.
And the polycrisis, right? So displacement and climate change,
Totally.
and the wars that are happening around. So it's always these transitions, right? And so
Always.
we're trying to
Yes.
support, not only just walk through them ourselves with our families and those that our loved ones around us, but also trying to help and support, our community as a whole, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
in your work, okay, might sound like a silly question, but maybe not, but maybe it is. Do people need to be taught to be kind? Like, how has been your experience, as a scholar, as an academic? Like, has that come out naturally for people just to be kind, or is kindness is like a trick you put in the bag, and it shows up when you want it to show up? And how has that been, for you as an academic?
Yeah.
How have you observed this?
That's a really great question. I think it's definitely a both and, that
Mm,
in some situations, we could teach each other how to be more kind. And so
yeah,
I know there are some studies that have been done, thinking about altruism, for example, and how it's
yeah,
natural in certain folks, but other folks can learn how to be more
mm,
altruistic, or can learn how
okay,
to be more generous and kind.
yeah,
And a lot of the studies that I do,
hmm
my kind of mindset around it is, a positive mindset, a
mm,
really strength based mindset,
yep,
that
yep,
we come into this world with a lot of strengths. And one of
yes,
those is like the ability to be kind, because it's a
yep,
natural motivator. Like,
yep,
being kind to other people is a way that we do make
yeah,
relationships and keep
yep,
relationships. It's a way
yep,
that we do survive in community and give back. And so our ancestors
yep,
deeply relied on, kindness and generosity
true,
in order for
true,
them to be able to survive. And so I
yep,
think it's an innate trait in a lot of ways, but
yep.
I'm saying that in a little bit out of turn, to say that there are studies that are saying that in some ways it's innate, and in other ways it's
Okay.
a behavior that's learned.
Yeah, sure, sure. So it's interesting, right? So I moved from Zimbabwe a couple of years back, well, many years back, to British Columbia, and I won't mention the institution I was at a particular time, but
Mhm.
I remember sitting down, and that it was during a break, and one of the senior leaders there, in fact there were two of them, said, you smile a lot,
Mm.
and I'm like, but it was being presented as a problem.
Yeah. Oh. Oh.
Yeah, yeah. I was
Okay.
like, I was like, huh? What? Right? I was like, and then I went back. So you speak about, our ancestors and the training. And I was like, well, yeah, I smile because you know what? And I told them, I said, I can find so many reasons not to be happy,
Mm.
but I choose to smile.
Yeah.
I choose to be happy, right? It's a
Yeah.
choice that I make each day that, hey, today is a beautiful day.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be happy. In fact, one of the things that I say to myself, and I work with my family here, and we're like, hey, let's find a reason to be nice to someone today. Let's find a reason to be kind to someone today, because people go through a lot,
Yeah.
right? And so
Absolutely.
you might be that just one smile, or your kind act might be just the one thing that brings hope and
Yeah.
restoration. and
Yeah,
healing to somebody who's gone through a lot, right? And
definitely.
so I found that a couple of years back. I was like, huh.
Yeah.
And then I began to understand that it's not common. It's not
Yeah.
common to be kind. It's not common to hold the door for someone. It's
Yeah.
not common. And the other example I have, funny one. So growing up back in Africa, in the village and in the city, so spend time in the city where we went to school, and then the minute we had the school holiday come up, the next day we're out on the bus and into the village.
Yeah.
And growing up, we'll be told the virtues of kindness, of respect, of
Mhm.
dignity, of
Mhm.
values. And one of those was when you're speaking with elders, you don't wear a cap, or when you're walking
Yep.
alongside with elders, you carry the heavy things that
Yes.
elders carry,
Yes.
right? And so that has been a part of my life. And so coming to campus to the University of Victoria, my
Yeah.
mentor and professor then, would meet on campus, and I'll be wearing my cap backwards, or immediately it's off, and then I'll be like, "Prof, I want to carry your bag," right? And the first couple of days he would resist. He'd be like,
Yeah.
"No, I can carry my own bag." I'm like, "Yes, I appreciate." And then when we go to class, I sit down with him and like, "Prof, it is very, very tough for me right now to
Yes.
walk alongside with you and not carry your bag. I
Definitely.
know that you can carry your bag, but this is where I'm coming from."
Right.
And luckily he had spent over 40 years working in Africa
Yeah.
doing different research projects, and he knew what that meant,
Yeah.
right? It didn't mean that he was elderly and that I was seeing him as unable to carry his bag, but
Right.
that it was actually out of politeness and kindness and respect and giving honor
Definitely.
to him. And so I realized, well, contextually it's different. And so with that, I wanted us to speak a little bit about your equitable mindfulness framework.
Mhm.
How have you applied that? How have you used that both in coaching as well as in academia?
Yeah. So really quickly, just to go back to
Yeah.
what you talked about with kind of these cultural contexts is
Yeah.
to get into, the equitable mindfulness piece. It is
Mm.
interesting because I find that in a lot of spaces, kindness and community are culturally grounded. And
Mm.
that's also another way that I try to conceptualize this work is to
Okay.
give reverence to the fact that many of us who are from the global majority and
Yeah.
specifically from global indigenous folks, like folks in
Yeah.
Africa, folks in
Yeah.
Asia, folks in these different
Yeah.
spaces,
Mm.
culturally have kindness kind of involved in the way that we're rooted and grown. And so being Black
Yes.
American, everything that
Yeah.
you said is exactly what we're taught too about making sure we take our cap off,
Yep.
before we even
Mm-hmm.
enter certain spaces, making sure
Yep.
we are carrying, bags and walking folks across the street and
Yes.
really caring for our
Yes.
elders. Like this is a part of who we
Uh-huh.
are. And
Yep.
so it
Mm-hmm.
was it was a bit of a culture shock for me to
Yep.
come like
Wow.
specifically here to
Yeah.
Vancouver and the West
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
And I should say the West of the US to be like,
Yeah.
okay, so these things aren't the same. Like y'all don't
Then
y'all don't do this for
you
y'all
don't do
elders.
this? Right. Yep. Yep. Yep.
So
It's
1000%.
interesting.
But
Wow.
that in itself is like you said, a great segue into
Yeah.
equitable mindfulness because
Yeah.
I started learning mindfulness when I was 10 years old. So it has been a part of
Wow.
my life for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, mindfulness is both cultural and spiritual in the sense that
Mm-hmm.
I learned mindfulness practices from both a South Asian perspective, but
Okay.
also um, an African perspective,
Mm-hmm.
specifically Nigerian Igbo type
Okay. Yeah.
of
From the
way of
Igbo. Yep.
being.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also someone who is indigenous to the Americas. My background is
Yep.
Choctaw. I also have
Yep.
ancestry in North Carolina Cherokee.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also a lot of rooted mindfulness practices within those spaces.
Yeah.
And so when I came into secular mindfulness, which is, a way of teaching mindfulness that's kind of rooted in but pulled away from the spiritual or in a
Okay.
lot of ways cultural roots
Sure.
of where these things have
Mm-hmm.
come from, I
Mm-hmm.
recognized the fact that like this was something that was just like not known to me.
Sure.
It felt um, unfamiliar. It felt like it was targeting specific people
Mm-hmm.
that weren't like me or like that I wasn't a part of. And so I wanted to make sure that everybody felt included in the
Yeah.
mindfulness practices that we were doing.
Sure.
Hence this title of equitable mindfulness, of really talking about the work of mindfulness um, in this broad demographic sense, but also really culturally bringing in the roots of all of
Yep.
these different folks who have been left out of the conversation traditionally. And by traditionally, I mean like in the modern times as we're
Yep.
talking about mindfulness.
Okay. Okay.
So that was really important to me. And
Yep.
the ways that I really implement this is in all the work that I do. So as a wellness
Okay.
practitioner, as a researcher, as, you know, a scholar, as all these different things, my mindset is always built upon the fact that there are people from, again, these global majority cultures that have given the world a lot of these different things that we are just now studying or just now coming upon to show, right? To show that it boosts health and wellness.
It
And
does.
so my whole thing is like, okay, but we have to not only honor those roots, we have to also bring them into these modern conversations because it's wrong of me, it's irresponsible of me to do science in this area without saying, okay, the indigenous folks of this area, the indigenous folks of this area, these particular cultures have been doing this for time immemorial. And that's irresponsible. So it's a part of the way that I work in, you know, in all the spaces that I kind of move into.
Sure. That's amazing. And you talk about just the root of many of these practices, right? It's something that has been done over millennia, but and then I'm happy that you're doing so much scholarship, bringing so much scholarship in terms of unpacking these practices and making sure that, again, people are kind to one another, patient with one another, but even with that there's, meditation, there's thoughtfulness that goes into just centering oneself. And again, whether it's, within the Asian culture or it's, an African, sort of, culture and the different subcultures, these things were always practiced. As we are speaking, and I love, by the way, let me say, I love the way that you say global majority. I love that, right? Because that's the kind of nomenclature that I'm always looking out for, right? Because, you hear this, developing world and developed world. I'm like, come on.
I know. Do not subscribe.
So every time you're saying global majority, I'm like, yes, right? Because that's absolutely important. And so talk to me about people's reactions, right? When it comes to whether it's, practices of mindfulness, is it something that people immediately embrace, right? So let's move from the academic bit and let's go into community. Is it something that is embraced? You spoke about, coming into the western part of the of North America, right? Is it something that people are embracing and taking on, or it's still, I'm going to get on the train first, I'm going to get on the bus first, I'm going to this first and this first and this first and this first? Are these concepts being well embraced here in Vancouver, in BC, as well as the western part of Canada?
I'll say I think people want to embrace them generally. I think the concepts are concepts that people want to embrace, in the sense that people want to slow down. People want to be mindful. People want to be thoughtful. People want that. And in a lot of ways don't know how to access it in their own lives. And so my whole thing is like the demographics that I usually do my work in, this specific equitable mindfulness work, are really in spaces that are BIPOC, queer, disabled, neurodivergent, right? Like these systemically marginalized spaces that, again, may have traditionally practiced this, but have lost the anchors to them because of capitalism and colonialism and all these things that have torn us apart. And so in those spaces, there's there's a deep hunger for mindfulness. I'll give you an example. One of my first times doing a workshop was actually going down to Arkansas. And if you know anything about Arkansas is in the deep South. It is generally one of the states that's seen as like, and I'm putting this in quotes because I'm from Tennessee, so I don't believe in this, but like backward and segregated and all of these particular things. And historically it has been segregated, so let me not, move over that point. But I went in because I was asked to come in and talk about mindfulness. And so many people were asking me like, are you sure? Like, are you sure you want to go to Arkansas and talk about mindfulness? Like, aren't people pretty conservative there or pretty strict? And I'm like, see, this is the problem right here. First of all, you're excluding people without even understanding their cultural roots too.
Their culture, true.
Number two, like, be demographic specific. You have to be able to go into these communities and talk about mindfulness in a way that they can understand. So one of my favorite things that I usually bring in this community is like, listen, everyone here has probably been in the kitchen cooking with their grandmother. that is a form of mindfulness.
Wow.
When you take the time to be with your grandmother, when you're noticing what's around you, when you are stirring the pot to make sure and putting love into it, right? Those are all forms of mindfulness. And so how do we extend those pieces of our lives to make sure that we're slowing down and being a part of this broader community? And that's the way that we can talk about mindfulness in these spaces without it being just the traditional way of thinking about it, you know, sitting, doing yoga, those type of things. Those things are phenomenal. They're great. I've practiced all of them. And how are we getting to the roots of these in people who may have been displaced from these mindfulness practices?
Yeah. Wow. That's so I mean, what I get from you, and correct me, please, and hopefully also help for my audience here too, right? Is that this is something that there's a thinking that has to go into it. Like you have to think around, hey, I want to be mindful, I want to be centered, and I want to be, in fact, the word is intentional that I'm looking for. There's some level of intentionality that has to, right? And so you coach about that too?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
So my definition of mindfulness, and this is important because before even talking about equitable mindfulness, which is what mindfulness for everyone with some caveats, my definition of mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment with intention.
Okay.
And so the intention piece is always a part of the ways in which we are in this present moment, right?
Okay, so now I'm going to push back a little bit. Well, I mean, the definition is fantastic. Now, how does Patrick be present in the moment? Patrick is a social entrepreneur and is wearing so many hats.
Yes.
And I know you're you're an entrepreneur, you're running Crowned Vitta, consulting, you're an academic. I mean, the rate at which you're churning publications and research is astounding. Fantastic. It's amazing. Right. And so how does one keep themselves sane?
Yes.
Right. What's your advice? Like, what should people do? What should entrepreneurs do? And I know I was reading somewhere, I mean, I've read a ton of stuff that you've written, and one of them that stuck out to me because I'm developing a training, for my consulting. It's called Moving Your Side Hustle to Being a Main Hustle. Right?
Love that. I love it.
And you coach and you say, it's just not about the hustle, but it's also about taking care of your mental health.
Yes.
So what would you say to entrepreneurs out there that are listening, that are just racing between wearing so many hats?
Yes.
How do I center myself? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite questions to answer. And there are going to be different layers to this. So I'll start by saying everything comes with practice. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. But the second thing I'm going to say that's going to hold weight in the same way that I'm saying that is that rest is our divine right.
Yep.
So everything comes with practice and rest is our divine right. Okay. So both of those things are really important in the framing of how I'm going to say this, because you're right. I'm also an entrepreneur that does a million things a day.
Oh my word.
And so how do I logically practice being mindful in my life? Well, let's go back to that definition, because the intention piece is really big. And so when I'm answering an email, am I fully in that email? Am I noticing the keys that I'm typing as I'm writing it? Am I being really intentional about the words that I am using? When I'm reading back over the email before I send it, am I putting my full values in it? Right? And these things can happen these are micro mindful moments. They can happen during the day, with everything that we're doing.
Micro mindful moments.
Micro mindful moments. Yes.
I love it. I love it. Okay. I love it.
And then there are other formal ways that we can do this, which is putting a timer on our phone every hour for 3 minutes to take breaths. So literally just decompress, decompose, get up, walk, be mindful as we're walking. The next 3 minutes, pour some tea. Be mindful as we're pouring the tea and smelling it. And as the steam hits our face, right? So we can be really intentional about making sure that we keep these pieces a part of it as well, right? Even, and this is, we're just going to be real. Even when we go to the restroom and we're washing our hands.
Absolutely. Yep.
Are you feeling the water that's coming on your hands? Are you being intentional about the way that you are washing so that you're in that moment? Those things are practicing. That
Yeah.
is the practice. The practice is being in the moment with
Wow.
intention. That's the practice.
Wow.
So we make it big. We make it huge. We talk about the fact
Yeah.
that every night you need to be sitting for 30 minutes. That
Yeah.
would be great if you could do that.
Yeah.
But everybody doesn't have the time. And especially with
Definitely.
the amount of
That's
global grief that we're going through right now, people
Yeah.
don't have the capacity. So
True.
what do you have the capacity for, right?
Mm.
Make that intentional
Mm.
in your life as you're doing it.
Mm.
The
Wow.
other piece is the fact that rest is our divine right. And
Yes.
I will not lie, and I will say that Trisha Hersey has been a hero
Woo!
in my
I
life.
was about to say, hey, rest is resistance, because I just love that book. Like, wow.
Oh, she has taught me so much.
Ah,
So much. Even about the way that I talk about mindfulness, she's taught me a lot.
wow.
And so when I really think about rest being our divine right, that in
Yeah.
itself is a is us deconstructing, decolonizing our mind from hustle
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
Because I think we can still do the things that we want to do.
Okay.
But how are we showing up to the things that we want to do?
Mm.
Am I showing up well rested?
Mm.
Am I showing up with enough sleep? Am I showing up with enough food in my belly? Am I showing up with the greatest capacity that I could possibly give in those moments? And if I'm not, should I be showing up? Am I actually taking moments throughout the day to remember why I'm doing this grassroots work? Because one of the things that I've been talking to people a lot about in coaching, specifically in entrepreneurship, is this thought process of, I need to make money.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's the eventual goal. But if you're not
Sure.
coming into this with the right values, if you're not saying to yourself, I'm not doing this to make money, I'm actually doing this for this particular reason,
Mm-hmm.
are you honoring yourself and the people who you're doing this work for? And that has to be the root of every piece. If that is, that in itself is a form of rest.
Yeah.
It's giving ourselves the things that we need to make sure that we are resting and digesting our bodies. It's literally physiologically reminding our bodies with breaths, with our gut, that listen, we're calm. We don't need cortisol. We don't need to, that hustle mindset, that hustle culture that's built from capitalism is what triggers that sympathetic nervous system. And so how are we building ourselves to be a pillar of rest through the parasympathetic system?
Whoa, listen, I'll just tell you that you had me right on the emails first. Like I'm still there. I'm here with you, but I'm like, yeah, emails. Like, am I true? Because I mean, last Thursday I sent an email and then I actually had to phone them like, hey, you know what? I didn't mean what I was trying to say in that email.
I sent it, but I didn't really sit with it.
But I didn't. So, I mean, you got me there, right? And even all of these things and thinking about, Trisha Hersey in the book and, Rest is Resistance that I keep right next to me upstairs, right? I'm like,
I love that.
At what point, right, do I rest? I frequently I'm over on the mainland in Vancouver, and I have started this practice, and I hope that will make you happy as a mindfulness coach and trainer and academic, that I'll get on the ferry in my car, we park the car, I'm safe, get my computer bag out, laptop, I'm typing and working. So recently I've said, no, Patrick, no. Leave your laptop, go upstairs onto the deck, take your walks and take in the beauty of the nature, take in the different islands you're going past, right?
I love that.
Because this is what is grounding you.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Initially it was difficult, right? I was like, but no, I got to prep up for this meeting. I got to do this, I got to do this. And then there's this expectation. And then I need to go to New West. From New West, I need to go to Surrey and then this. So I just need, but then now I'm like, no. That is going to happen when it happens. For now, I'm here and I need to enjoy this space. Absolutely. And so thank you so much for bringing that awareness. And it's just so amazing that as an entrepreneur, I am moving between, and so in the training that I've been working on, I've written a section around the art of compartmentalization, right? And I'm talking about how to move between different things or different schedules or different, events or projects, right? And taking that time to be fully present, right? Because I heard you talking about being fully present, whether you're washing your hands or you're chopping up onions or tomatoes to make your salad or to cook, like you're fully present there and just taking that all in, right? And so thank you for that work that you bring in into this space. What has been as you coach, obviously maybe not to share any private and confidential moments, but what has been an interesting moment for you? Like what has been the biggest learning that you have come across? Like when people say, oh wow, I did this. What has been wild? Like what have you heard that's been crazy?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be hard to narrow this down.
Yeah.
Just as I'm sure this is for you.
Yeah.
There's so much.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I'm gonna go back. I think I'm gonna go back to Arkansas because
sure. Yep.
I started there, and just this summer I went back.
Oh wow. Okay.
And it was with the same like company, the same individuals.
Sure. Yep.
And being in Vancouver for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think I had forgotten was how natural a lot of this work is for people. And it goes right back to the beginning we had just talked about, how culturally and how this is a part of who they are.
Yeah.
Being here, I find myself running against the wall a lot with folks where I'm just trying to get through this one concept today so that you can, so I can plant the seeds for you to hopefully figure all these other things out, right? It's just like, I just need to get this one concept planted.
Yeah.
Well, I went back to Arkansas, and first of all, being back in the South was exactly what I needed as a person. Again, when we're talking about those rest things, a form of rest for me there was just like breathing in Black women. And I don't know how else to explain it, but being in the presence of aunties.
Yeah.
But the thing that I found the most surprising was when I went to do a presentation for Head Start teachers. So teachers who work in this particular system of, folks who may be low income,
early childhood access, etc. Yeah.
So they're those particular teachers, and they're for pre-K and K. And I started talking about a concept. I was like deep into equitable mindfulness, like theory-wise, like I was going in. And before I went in, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be too much. Like, why am I doing all this? But I went through it, and then I turned around and I looked at the audience, and I was like, does that make sense, or do we have questions?
Yeah.
And literally almost everyone in that room was like, that makes sense. We get it.
Wow.
The connections were there immediately. There was no need for like, well, if it's this, then is it this? Or they were like, no, that we see that every day. Like, that's literally who we are. That's our job. That's like how we walk in the world. Of course this makes sense to us. And it was further tested because then we went through the exercises, and immediately people were getting it. They were like, oh yeah, like, this is how I would do this in the classroom. This is how, and so it reminded me that the people who we often leave out because of systemic marginalization, because of capitalism, because of colonialism, are often the people who are the most knowledgeable in these areas. Yeah. And to platform them.
That's so profound. That's so profound. Wow, what an experience, right? and it reminds me of a meeting I was in this morning, and I was talking to a colleague about grant making and philanthropy, right? And one of the things that we're talking about was, and she was saying to me, well, there are certain sectors that are underfunded. I'm like, I agree, and particularly, the BIPOC and people of African descent are underfunded, and it's a struggle, and it was coming from such an interesting perspective that I thought I would need to switch around, because I come from an appreciative inquiry mindset, a strength-based mindset. And I said, hey, hold on. Let me just give you an insight into people of African descent. that we have always been generous. We've
Yes.
always been givers. We've like
Yes.
we philanthropy is not new to us.
Yes.
Like we've always given money. We've given time.
Yes.
We've given off of ourselves, our food. Like no one has gone hungry in communities
That's
because
right.
we say we take care of each other, right?
Yes.
And so I understand the systemic inequities that exist when it comes to accessing the bigger pie.
Yes.
But let us not throw away the baby with the bathwater.
Yes.
Like let's just not say we're not getting this and this. Let's look into ourselves. And so when you speak about, oh yeah, we get it. Yes, because for 1,000 years, that's how we were practicing, right? Mindfulness. And then of course, hustle culture comes in and everything is, thrown out of the plate, and we focus on the economy of survival and trying to make it in this capitalistic capitalist world. So interesting, experience. Our time is coming up, but there are a couple of things that, in fact, one thing that I would not want to leave this show without asking you. If you were to have dinner or lunch with 3 people, alive or dead, who would they be? 3 people.
3 people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you 2 that immediately came to mind.
Okay. Yep. Let's have them.
My grandfather, who passed before I was born.
Okay.
And Malcolm X.
Okay. Your grandfather, and why?
So my grandfather, was the first 2-time Olympian to win back-to-back gold medals in the 110 hurdles.
Wow.
So he was a phenomenal athlete, track and field athlete.
Yep.
But the biggest thing that I learned about him throughout his life, from like going to the yearly meets that we had, in his name and so forth and so on, was that he was also one of the most caring people, like ever. That he treated all his athletes as his children. Yeah. That he humbled himself in a lot of ways, even with these accolades, so much so that like sometimes he would walk into a room and not even want that to be a part of,
Wow.
And my mom is like that as well. Like it definitely got passed down, but there's something special. I want to talk to him specifically about this humbling piece.
Oh, wow.
About the specialness of of doing something great and grand. Yeah. And letting that speak for itself, but also as a person, like who were you as a person when you came into these spaces? So that's what I would say for him. I think Malcolm X was just a genius. Yep. I think he was one of the smartest people on this planet, and he happened to be a leader at a time that wasn't ready for him. Yeah. I concur. One of the things that I loved the most about his politics was his vision to really unify people who were globally oppressed to understand how we're better in community. True. And so I would definitely want to talk to him about those community aspects, about like, what did you do or how did you come to think about the world as your neighbor? Yeah. So,
Wow. 2. So one more.
Okay, one more.
Malcolm X. I mean, as you think about that, I'll reflect on even just what you've said about Malcolm X, right? And this is what one of the things that also inspired my consulting firm, the business, right? To Ubuntu. I am because we are, right? Yes. That it's community, right? And so our values is humanity, is collaboration, is compassion. Because I feel that without any of these, then what's the reason for existence, right? Absolutely. My grandma used to say, hey, you don't lose anything by being kind to someone. Like you lose nothing. My grandchildren, you lose nothing, right? And so it's those values and for Malcolm X, right? It's those, community-centered principles. Like we are in it together. We can go much further together than than one individual. So thanks for bringing that.
And I do have my last person. I'm surprised I didn't say this first, because so much of my work is a reflection of bell hooks. And so bell hooks would definitely be probably one of my first choices. Sorry, Because again, her fierce love, her idea of fierce love and what that meant in uniting people, what that meant in creating beloved community. Like that to me is really kind of a basis of why I do the work that I do. It's from fierce love.
Yep.
So,
And I think of even just Baruch's way of talking about, critical thinking and bringing critical thinking aspects into the classroom, right? And helping, to drive the issues of introspection and reflection and why am I being told what I'm being told and what aspect is missing from what I'm being told, right?
1,000%.
And so, yeah, I'll join you. I'll be your +1 for those dinners.
Sounds great. You're welcome to come.
I'll join. I'll join to those dinners, man. I wish I would, continue this conversation with you, Tiara Cash. Really a scholar practitioner focused on critical development, critical contemplative practices, with a great vision of developing inclusive communities through pro-social action, resilience through life transitions, as well as equitable mindfulness. My friend, flowers to you.
Thank you.
You're doing amazing work, and Voices Less Heard podcast is to really bring people that don't talk about themselves. I mean, when I did research and I started just Googling Tiara Cash, I'm like, so many things popping up, and academic articles and involvement in community and all of these things that you do have been amazing. And so congratulations, my friend. I honor you, respect you, and please continue burning the torch as you bring in mindful, equitable practices to community here in Canada, the US, and beyond. Grateful for you.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be on this fantastic show with you, Dr. P.
Awesome. Awesome. Friends, listeners, thank you so much for joining us for this podcast episode of Voices Less Heard with Dr. PMak. Until next time, thank you. Thank you for listening to the Voices Less Heard podcast with Dr. PMak. I hope you enjoyed insights that came out of this conversation. Keep your notifications on. Our next episode will be dropping soon. Thank you and enjoy.